Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajikacharya Stotra Satashi Shima's Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Bibidi Boundacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajikacharya Stotra Satashi Shima His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Gaudiya Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giridhar Shri Vasudeva Gauda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Kodam Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Samabhaira Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai Brihat Madanga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru Garam. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. Okay, so first of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Prabhu, you can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay, all right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 11th chapter, and we're on text number 20. Okay. Natanartaka Gandharva Sutamaga Davadina Gayanti Chotamashloka Charitan Yadbhutani Cha Nataka Nartaka Gandharva Sutamagada Vadinaha Gayanti Chotamashloka Charitan Yadbhutani Cha Natamartaka Gandharvaha Sutamagada Vadinaha Gayanti Chotamashloka Charitan Yadbhutani Cha. Anybody else like to chant? Do other people chant or just?
Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, yeah.
Attention, great Prabhu. Nata Nartaka Gandharva Suta Magata Vandinaha Gayanti Chottama Shloka Charitani Adbhutani Cha.
Can you share the screen, Prabhu? The words, sir?
Yeah, I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Natanartaka Gandharva Sutamagda Vandina Gayanti Chotama Sloka Charitani Adbhutani Cha.
Natanartaka Gandharva Sutamagadha Vandinaha Gayanti Chottama Sloka Charitanya Bhutani Cha.
Okay, is that everybody?
Yeah.
I think so. Okay.
Mataji, Mataji,
Yeah.
you try.
Okay. So, Nata, dramatists, Nartaka, dancers, Gandharva, celestial singers, Suta, professional historians, Magada, professional genealogists, Vadinaha, professional learned speakers, Gayanti, chant, Cha, respectively, Uttama Shloka, the Supreme Lord, Jaditani, activities, Adbhutani, all superhuman, Cha, and translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Expert dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, and learned speakers all gave their respective contributions, being inspired by the superhuman pastimes of the Lord. Thus they proceeded on and on. Purport. It appears that 5,000 years ago, the society also needed the services of the dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, public speakers, etc. Dancers, singers, and dramatic artists mostly hail from the Sudra community, whereas the learned historians, genealogists, and public speakers hailed from the Brahmin community. All of that, hailed is just another way of saying came from. All of them belonged to a particular caste, and they became so trained in their respective families. Such dramatists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, and public speakers would dwell on the subject of the Lord's superhuman activities in different ages and millenniums, and not on ordinary events, nor were they in chronological order. All the Puranas are historical facts described only in relation with the Supreme Lord in different ages and times, as well as on different planets also. Therefore, we do not find any chronological order. The modern histories, therefore, cannot catch up the link unless they unauthoritatively remark that the Puranas are all imaginary stories only. Even 100 years ago, in India, all dramatic performances were centered around the superhuman activities of the Supreme Lord. The common people would be verily entertained by the performances of dramas and yatra parties played wonderfully on the superhuman activities of the Lord. And thus, even the illiterate agriculturist would be a participant in the knowledge of Vedic literature. Trying to make a note here. Therefore, despite a considerable lack of academic qualifications, therefore expert players in drama, dancers, singers, speakers, etc., are required for the spiritual enlightenment of the common man. The genealogists would give account completely of the descendants of a particular family. Even at the present moment, the guides in the pilgrimage sites of India submit a complete account of genealogical tables before a newcomer. This wonderful act sometimes attracts more customers to receive such important information. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Virati Swapadantikam. So, what's happening here is Krishna is entering Dwarka, and everybody's all excited. You know, we heard that already you guys heard, I read it, that the ladies were running to the tops of the buildings, to see the Lord and throw flowers and etc. Everybody's getting all excited, coming out to participate in this incredible, unique event that Krishna is entering Dwarka, is returning back to Dwarka. And they've been anxiously awaiting this return. And now they're all excited. Everybody's coming forward. And what's the point that's being made here is that the people, these different types of people that are coming, everybody's wanting to participate, offer their service in a way in which they can. And that's why you have expert dramatists, artists, dancers, singers. They're all there. Simultaneously, everybody's doing their thing. As Krishna is slowly coming into Dwarka, you have to try to visualize this. These expert dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, they're doing their things right out there. Right out. There's a big procession coming in, and they're singing and dancing and performing dramas, because it's all moving very slowly for Krishna's pleasure, and everybody else is being, as mentioned in the purport, also being entertained and everything. But of course, the center of its attention, the center is Krishna. But this is all going on, and it's all going on to please Krishna, and it's in order to please Krishna, it's all being done in the mood of, with the intention of glorifying the Lord. Okay, so that's what's the general scene that's happening here. So Prabhupada, because it points out here, so the dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, and learned speakers all gave their respective contributions. So this is all going on, as I said, as the procession's moving in, is being inspired by the superhuman pastimes of the Lord. So they're all meditating on the glories of Krishna, and it's confirmed here, says, thus they proceeded on and on. So it's moving. It's all happening as, it's like as this slow parade of Krishna entering into Dwarka. Okay, so now the purport, Prabhupada says, it appears that 5,000 years ago, the society also needed the service of dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, public speakers, and etc. Why? Why did society need that service? Well, Prabhupada answers that question later on in the purport. And the answer to that question is that because Krishna's created things in such a way that there's an overall cooperation, just like in the Bhagavad Gita, you have explained, there's Chaturvana Mayashrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. There's people coming from all in human society have different karmic backgrounds, and some are acting as Brahmins, the intellectual and, more important, the spiritual inspiration for the other groups. Then there's the Kshatriyas, they protect everybody, administrate. Then there's the Vaishyas, they generate an economy. And there's the Sudras, and they will assist in all those other three castes in whatever way they can. And there's a lot of different ways that they need that assistance. They're the labor, they're the arms, not the arms, but they're the legs. They make it happen, right? And and they all work cooperatively. So that's why the service of these people were needed, because as Prabhupada points out here and later in the purport, he says the common people, that's the Sudras, let's say, would be verily entertained by the performances of dramas, yatra parties played wonderfully on the superhuman activities of the Lord. And thus even the illiterate agriculturalists would be a participant in the knowledge of the Vedic literature. See, so that's, okay, the illiterate agriculturalists, that's not referring to Vaishyas. Vaishyas, don't forget, Vaishyas, they're in some situations considered twice born. They had people helping them, just like they had people helping them. I mean, if somebody, the illiterate agriculturist is just somebody who's basically a Sudra who's working for a Vaishya. So they wouldn't be somebody who'd appreciate Brahminical knowledge, the knowledge coming directly from the Vedas. They were illiterate; they couldn't read. See, but they would be, their Krishna consciousness would come in this channel. Their Krishna consciousness would come, and they get their Krishna consciousness by seeing these performances of dramas and etc., on the superhuman activities of the Lord. And thus, even the illiterate agriculturist would be a participant in the knowledge of Vedic literature. That's how they could participate like that. You see? So all these different people were needed: the dramatists, the artists, the dancers, the singers, the songwriters, because that's how the illiterate agriculturist, the common man, would be able to participate in the knowledge of the Vedic literature. And of course, they in turn, the common man, the illiterate agriculturist, they would be working, they'd be out there laboring, and they'd be providing the food, for people, all these other, because the Brahmins and the Kshatris and the Vaishyas, they have to eat, you see? So these illiterate agriculturists would be out there and they'd be working hard and doing the actual labor to produce the food. And in exchange, these higher class, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, the Brahmins, or in all fairness, it did mention that the dramatists, the artists, the dancers, and the singers, they came from the Sudra class, but they had to be organized, you see? So everything has to be organized by somebody with higher intelligence. So they were organized in such a way as they would be focused on these superhuman activities of the Lord by these higher castes, particularly the Brahmins, so that it would be beneficial for them, rather than doing, as Prabhupada said, cinema songs and dancing about all sorts of nonsense. They were inspired and directed by the Brahmins to focus on these superhuman activities of the Lord, glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That way they would be entertained, but it would be be more than just entertainment. It would be, spiritual culture. It would be educational for them and uplifting and enlightening for them. So that's why that was there. And it goes on to say here, so they would be, and this is the way they would participate in the knowledge of Vedic literature, despite a considerable lack of academic qualification. Well, they have no academic qualification. I mean, they wouldn't be able to even write their own name. They're illiterate, okay? Basically no academic qualification. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, therefore, expert players in drama, dancers, singers, speakers, etc., are required for the spiritual enlightenment of the common people. So there's the reason. That's the answer to the question I said. Why? It's just because in the first sentence it says they were needed, and and that's the reason why they were needed. They were needed or required for the spiritual enlightenment of the common man, these illiterate agriculturists. Okay. Then it goes on to say, well, here's another question. And here's another point. And this is kind of touching upon this point of harmony and how Christians arrange things. They were needed and they needed too. And this is, they were needed, their services were needed, but these personalities, these people who are dancers, artists, singers, etc., they needed to serve in that way. Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, all of them belonged to a particular caste, and they became so trained in their respective families. So as everybody's got a particular nature, and people have to, the beauty of the Vedic culture at this time, of India at this time, this is 5,000 years ago, was that people were engaged in this transcendental experience according to their nature. And that's very important, because if you try to engage somebody contrary to their nature, it's very difficult for them, if not impossible, to do that. They're not comfortable, that it doesn't work. So people were engaged according to their nature. And there's a very nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, encourages that, he acknowledges the importance of that, and he encourages the practice of that. And that is Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, text 46, where he says, Yata pravritti bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam sarva karmana tam abhyarchya siddhim vindati manavaha. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading. Okay, that's interesting right there. But here it comes. A man can attain perfection through performing his own work. You see? So that means your own nature. You work according to your nature for Krishna, and by doing that, you can attain perfection. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, everyone should think that he's engaged in a particular type of occupation by Rishikesh, the master of the senses. So nothing is, nobody's, in that sense, nobody's inferior. Everybody, okay, you're born, you got a particular karma or whatever, particular type of psychophysiological makeup. Rather than be thinking, oh, I'm inferior, I'm a Sudra, I'm inferior to the Brahmin, I'm inferior to the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas. No, this is my service. Krishna's giving, the positive way to think about it is rather than, develop an inferiority complex because you're not the topmost Brahmin or something like that. The positive way to think about it is, okay, I'm this, I got this nature. And this is Krishna's arrangement, and let me engage in the particular, according to my nature, to serve Rishikesh, the master of the senses. You see, you focus on that rather than focus on the material distinction between the Brahman, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and the Sudra. Focus on, okay, and there's the absorption, the focus, and the absorption. Ideally, is to be on Krishna. See, so you're thinking like this. So you should. Prabhupada says everyone should think. This is, you have to practice thinking like this. That I'm engaged in this particular occupation by Rishikesh, the master of the senses. This is Krishna's arrangement. This is Krishna's mercy. I get to serve like this. You see, and if you cultivate that type of mentality, that counteracts this whole material bodily concept of life. That I'm a Sudra, I'm inferior to the Brahmins, or I'm a Brahmin, I'm superior. No, this is the meditation. Everyone should think like what I just read. And Prabhupada goes on to say, and by the result of work, in which one is engaged, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, should be worshipped. Okay? And that's another point. It's not just a sentiment. It's backed by this mentality, just cultivating this mentality of, that thinking that I should be engaged. I'm engaged in my occupation by Rishikesh, the master of the senses. It's as I said, it's got philosophical background because you're worshiping Krishna by the work that you can perform according to your nature. And the result of that will be, as mentioned here, says here, the Supreme Lord, okay, in whatever occupation one may be engaged, if he serves the Supreme Lord, he will achieve the highest perfection. So that was the inspiration. And that's why it worked, because it wasn't just a sentiment. It wasn't just some sort of a, throw the dog some table scraps, keep him happy. No, there was a very profound philosophical principle that this was based upon, which was that the fact of the matter was, in other words, that if you serve the Lord according to your occupation, that you would achieve the highest perfection. See, so these people, the common man, the illiterate agriculturist, they weren't stupid. They maybe, they weren't literate, and they were doing that type of work. But human beings by nature are intelligent. Even today, what to speak of 5,000 years ago. So these people could understand that, this is, they understood it and they believed it, that by performing my occupation, be it, a labor in the field, whatever, I'm doing it to serve Krishna, to serve the Supreme Lord, and I'm going to achieve the highest perfection. So I'm not going to be envious of the Vaishyas or the Kshatriyas or the Brahmins. I don't need to be. I'm fine where I am. I'll do my whatever I can do. And I'm going to do it to serve the Supreme Lord. And by doing that, I will achieve the highest perfection. So what was important was the development of spiritual consciousness, not upward social mobility. That's a new thing. It's not that new, unfortunately, but that wasn't what was important in the Vedic culture. Actually, pretty much that concept almost didn't exist. When you read the Bhagavatam, there's very few instances of somebody striving for upward social mobility. They generally, the caste system is criticized because, but it's good in the sense that, but the reason it's criticized because it's misunderstood. The caste system was there, or the Varnashram system was there, not as a mechanism to improve everybody's experience here in the material world as much as it was to give everybody a facility to advance and elevate themselves spiritually. In other words, just be happy where you are. There's no need for upward mobility, for climbing the ladder of success. Just be happy, be peaceful. And if you're a Sudra, be happy, peaceful. If you're whatever you are, be happy, and just try to become more Krishna conscious. Don't strive as a, if you're a Sudra, it's not like I got to become a Vaishya. I got to become a Brahmin. Well, at least the Kshatriya were the Vaishya. No, they weren't thinking like that. They just were happy in whatever they understood. They're satisfied in their position. They did it. They executed their duty, thinking that by doing this, I'm serving the Lord. And if I do it favorably, I'll achieve the highest perfection. So it's a very beautiful system like that. So that was going on there. Now here's another point. Says here, such dramatists, dancers, sing. Okay, yeah. Good. Such dramatists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, and public speakers would dwell on the subject of the Lord's superhuman activities in different ages and millenniums. Okay, so once again, everybody's focused, because it said these dramatists, dancers, singers, they were from the Sudras, hailed, probably use that nice old English word, hailed from the Sudra community, but they were focused on the Lord's superhuman activities, as were the historians and the genealogists who generally were from the Brahmin community. But everybody was focused on the Lord's superhuman activities, which took place in different ages and millenniums and are not ordinary events, nor were they in chronological order. And I'm going to say something about that in a second. All the Puranas are historical facts described only in relation to the Supreme Lord in different ages and times, as well as on different planets also. Therefore, we do not find any chronological order. Prabhupada makes that point again, not chronological order. The modern historians, therefore, cannot catch up the link unless they unauthoritatively remark that the Puranas are all imaginary stories only. Okay, so I'm going to tell you right now what the link is, that they can't catch up, okay? The link is that these literatures, these Puranas, the Vedic literatures, they're not history books. They're not meant to be history books. They're not science textbooks, you see? These guys are reading it, these modern scholars, modern historians, and they're reading it thinking, well, wait a second, it's just, when did this happen? And how does that doesn't fit into our picture of reality or our picture of history as we've understood it. So it's not meant for that purpose. It's kind of like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole or a round peg into a square, however that expression goes. They're meant for an entirely different purpose, which is to elevate people spiritually, you see? So the Puranas, the Vedic literatures, they're not chronologically driven. That's not an important point, you see? What's important is the message, you see? The Vyasadeva, he's trying to present a message that will gradually, progressively uplift who's ever the audience to higher and higher levels of spiritual understanding. And so he's taking references from the different Puranas, events that happened in different planets at different times, in different ages, but to illustrate the point he's making, to support the point he's trying to make, the message he's trying to get across to his audience, which will help them advance spiritually. See, so that's the missing link, and that's what they don't understand. They don't understand that these literatures are meant to elevate people spiritually. They're not history textbooks. They're not science textbooks. I think that's what's being meant here, and that's what they're missing out on. Okay, moving on a little bit more. So the next sentence goes, even 100 years ago in India, all dramatic performances were centered around the superhuman activities of the Supreme Lord. So now why is that sentence significant? That's significant because it tells us that 100 years ago is 4,900. We always hear that Krishna was here 5,000 years ago. So 100 years ago is still 4,900 years after Krishna was present on the planet. So it's interesting to note that even 4,900 years after Krishna was on the planet, India was still experiencing the influence, the impact of that event, or more than that, of that situation. In other words, it's India, even 100 years ago, had not gone off the deep end. That's what it's saying here in so many different words. It hadn't gone off the deep end. It wasn't too far gone. See, even 100 years ago, all the dramatic performances in India were still centered around the superhuman activities of the Supreme Lord. Of course, they're not now, which is sad, which is unfortunate and very sad. But hey, Kali Yuga is progressing. And India's changed a lot over the last 100 years. I've heard it said, not by Prabhupada, but by devotees, that what the Muslims couldn't do in 700 years of occupying India, and what the British couldn't do in 300 years of occupying India, American, Western civilizations such as, TVs and cell phones and all this kind of stuff has done in like 10, 15, 20 years. And it ruined the culture. See, I mean, the Islamic, or how does it refer to, the Mohammedan occupational government, they wanted to ruin the culture. Actually, they really didn't care. They just as long as everybody was quiet. The British, though, they had a specific plan. They wanted to destroy the culture because they thought that the only way we could actually rule these people is they have to give up that culture. As long as they're still identifying themselves with that culture, it's a totally different picture, way of thinking about life. It's going to be impossible. So they did everything they could to undermine the culture, and they did a lot. They did a lot of damage. But not as much damage. In 300 years, they couldn't do as much damage as satellite television and the internet has done in 50 years, or less, really less, 20 years. So anyway, but it's interesting to note that even as recently as 100 years ago in India, all dramatic performances were centered around the superhuman activities of the Supreme Lord. Now, another point is that upon hearing this, we don't need to feel sad and lament that, okay, yeah, it's nice to know that even up to 100 years ago, India was still so Krishna conscious, but they've lost it now. Yeah, but it does say in the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni says, I think it's in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's stated, there's a verse that states that the principles of Varnashrama can be reawakened in India at any moment. And it's like a fire that's smoldering, if you ever been camped out or something like that, sometimes, you could have a fire, like a campfire, and it can be a blazing, and that's wonderful. But, when everybody goes to bed and nobody's awake to put more wood in the fire. So it kind of, burns down. And when you wake up the next morning, you don't necessarily see any flames, but there's a bed of red hot coals, you see? So all you need to do in the morning, you don't need to start a new fire. You just need to throw some dry kindling on that and then gradually build it up again. The fire's there, in other words. The fire's still there. You got the bed of red hot coals there. So that's India. The fire's not out. It's India, according to Narada Muni, India always has the potential to reawaken, to an active spiritual culture at any point in time. So there's always hope. In other words, there's big hope, and there's really big hope. You have a prime minister in India that's kind of like a devotee. That man is very, favorable to ISKCON. And just in the UK now, they have the prime minister is an Indian man who's, right after he got elected, he went to the temple, in the manor to pay obeisances to Prabhupada and see the deities. So Hare Krishna, in other words, it's hope. Anyway, so that's that sentence here. The common people will be verily entertained by performances of dramas, yatras, yatra parties. I don't know exactly what yatra parties do. Maybe they chant. I mean, I know what dramas are yatra parties. I guess the only thing I could think of was yatra parties played wonderfully. Maybe, chanting parties on the superhuman activities of the Lord. And we read that already. Then it goes on here to say the genealogist would give account completely of the descendants of a particular family. Even at the present moment, guides in the pilgrimage sites of India submit a complete account of genealogical tables before a newcomer. So Prabhupada referred to that in some of his lectures. Anyway, I'll read the last sentence. This wonderful act which sometimes attracts more customers to receive such important information. So this is an example of the cooperation. As I said, the common man, the illiterate agriculturist, the laborers, they contribute like that. Whereas these Brahmins, this was done by Brahmins. Prabhupada, in a lecture, at least one lecture, I heard him talk about these. They call them Bhrigus. Ironically, my name is Bhrgupati Das, but there's no connection there. But they call them Bhrigus, and they're expert in a particular system of astrology, which was created by Bhrigumuni, one of the mentally generated sons of Lord Brahma. And it's almost like, when they do it, it's unbelievable, to the common person, because how could he possibly know that about me? So imagine this, let's fluff this out a little bit. Okay. You're on a pilgrimage. You get to some pilgrimage site and there's a guide there. And the guide, upon seeing you, he gives you a chart and it's telling you all about you, your life up to that point, your relatives, your ancestors, et cetera, et cetera. He's giving you all sorts of information about you. He never saw you before. You never saw him before in your entire life. He never saw you before in your entire life. And there he is telling you about your whole life. And you just arrived. There's been no conversation. He hasn't spoken to you, nothing. How is that possible? But that's what these guys could do. You see? So naturally the people, ordinary people, upon experiencing something like that, they'd be pretty like wowed, pretty like, whoa. And they get impressed. And as Prabhupada says, the effect is that it's a wonderful act, it sometimes attracts more customers to receive such important information. So it gets them interested in the whole experience of going, experiencing something higher and greater than the level that they're already. It's something that kind of tugs at them to bring them to a higher level. See, so in this way, the Brahmins are performing a service to these, these other sections of society. And the other sections of society are benefited. They get inspired by it. So it's like, parasparam, there's a cooperation. And okay, so that's the translation of the purport. So this cooperation point, it's a very important point. Actually, it's like a kind of like a very central point to our philosophy, to life. I don't know quite how to lead into this, but this I was describing how there's a harmony between the different social orders, and ultimately this principle of harmony is perhaps the most important, when fully understood, is the most important principle in life. And in that, ultimately, the actual goal, the complete goal of the human form of life is to live in complete harmony with the will of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. That is the ultimate goal of life for the jiva. Right now, we're jivas in human bodies, okay? And certainly it's the goal for the human being, and it's even beyond, it's the ultimate goal for the jiva to be living in perfect harmony with the will of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. And so that's something it's something, first of all, we have to understand intellectually, and then we got to work at it. Harmony is when, let's generally the way in which we're used to hearing the word harmony is with music. Okay, so we'll use that and try to make an analogy out of it. In music, say you play the note C. I'm assuming everybody has like some very basic understanding of music. You play the note C. It's a single note, okay, on the piano keyboard, let's say. And say you hit the note C and G at the same time. That's a chord. That's a chord, okay? Chords are what form the basic structure of harmony, right? So when you play the C and you play the G at the same time, you have a chord, okay? Now, that sounds okay, but then when you add an E to it, it's called a triad, and that's like an embellishment on the chord. Even two notes is a chord, but when you add that third note, it becomes what's called a triad. It's a particular type of chord, and it enhances the experience of the listener. The music is more rich and expressive with that third note, okay? So, and then somebody who's an expert musician or a more accomplished pianist, not necessarily expert, but more, there's other notes you could add, an augmented seventh or this or that, I mean, you could have a chord with 10 notes where you got 10 fingers, you see? So these expert pianists don't know how to expand that chord to 10 notes. And whoa, it really kind of, gives it like an incredible additional flavor. And they could play it simultaneously, and then they kind of like, lead into it, starting with the bottom notes and then up to the, anyway, they have different ways of presenting it so that it really enriches and enhances the whole overall experience. So that's what harmony is all about. So the analogy is this, that as human beings, let's talk about ourselves as human beings, okay? That's our experience at this point. At least I think, speak for myself, I'm experiencing myself as a human being as opposed to a Nityasiddha servant of Krishna. Okay, so we have all sorts of different qualities, attributes, okay? So it's kind of like when I decide to get up early in the morning to be on time for Mangalarti. That's like one aspect of my personality. Okay? Another aspect of my personality is if I decide I'm going to go out on Sankirtan and try to be very friendly and charming to the people in order to get them to take a book and give a donation. Another aspect, another talent, that people potentially have is, say I decide I want to give a class like I'm trying to do now. So I can use that requires the ability, I have to, think about what I'm going to say and make an outline and, try to put together a few points that are relevant and interesting, etc. Say I want to lead a kirtan. Okay, so each one of these things you could think of like as a note. Each different like talent or ability that a person has is a note. So it's okay, say we want to, if you just surrender one thing to Krishna, I'll get up early. Okay, that's like you played one note. But when you do that and you also decide I'll get up early and I'll go to Mangalarti, that's like hitting the C note and the G note. Okay, and then when you decide I'll do that, I'll get up early, I'll go to Mangalarti and I'll lead the Mangalarti, that's like you're hitting the C note, the G note, and the E note. You see, in other words, you're enhancing the whole thing. So the point I'm trying to make is that just like with that expert or the accomplished pianist, he knows how to use all 10 fingers to make that chord. He's not just doing a 2-note chord. He could do a 10-note chord. So in the same way, the more we use our different talents and abilities and everything in Krishna's service, the more the harmony. You see, it's the more rich the experience, the more Krishna's pleased. That's why, the richness of the experience. So we have to, you've heard that expression, we have to surrender fully to Krishna. Another way of saying it is that you have to try to be in complete, full harmony. Or whatever you got, if you got some brains, use it to preach to people. If you got some, if you got some musical ability, use it to lead kirtans. If you have some artistic talents, use it to, to decorate the temple and paint Krishnas for Krishna. If you can cook, whatever you got, the more you use your different talents and abilities in Krishna's service, it's like adding notes to that chord, and it's going to be, a richer, more fuller experience. Krishna's going to be more pleased, basically, and that's why. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to be in discord. The opposite of a chord is a discord. It's when you hit a note and then you hit that second note and you just don't go, or you hit two other notes and it's like, it's unpleasant. It's discord. So we want to avoid discord. We want to have chords and then progression of chords. I'll give you an example about this idea of progression of chords. Okay, this is like an example from my own life, own experience. So when I was, I don't know, I can't remember how old I was. I was a kid. Okay, I was in school, and they used to have dances here in America. They had dances at the school, and somehow my mother could see that, I wasn't wanting to go, so she kind of, prodded a bit, and she figured out that the reason I didn't want to go to the dance is because I didn't know how to dance. I didn't know how to dance, and I was embarrassed. I don't want to go there. I'll look foolish. I'll look stupid. I don't know how to dance. So my mother wanted, she didn't want me to be kind of like socially ostracized. So she said, come on. My mother was a good dancer. So she was trying to encourage, come on. And my name was, before I got initiated, my name was Jeffrey. So my mother used to call me Jeffy. That was her like affectionate name for me. She said, come on, Jeffy, I'll teach you how to dance. I said, Mom, I don't know how to dance. I tried. I got 2 left feet. I don't know how to dance. She said, no, it's okay. You look, I'm a good dancer. I can dance. But you just dance with me. You lead, I'll follow. I said, but Mom, I don't know how to dance. She said, it doesn't matter. You just lead, I'll follow. In other words, she was confident that whatever I did, whatever clumsy, tripping kind of movements I made, she'd be able to follow, and she could. So so the idea is that we have to have that mood, attitude towards Krishna. Okay, Krishna, this is what harmony, part of harmony is. Okay, Krishna, you lead, I'll follow. You see, Krishna, you lead, I'll follow. I'll follow your lead. That's what it means to be in harmony with the will of Krishna. Here's another, mundane example, crude. Sometimes if you go to a party and there's some music playing or something like that, there's some guy, some friend of yours, he picks up the guitar and he doesn't really play the guitar. He's not like really expert playing at the guitar, but he knows some chord progressions. He knows C, G, F, A, like that. So he knows like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 chords or whatever. And he can, it doesn't take much. You can hear when the song changes and you just move to the other chord and you just strum, you see? So we have to be able to do that with Krishna. Krishna is leading and we have to be able to, change the chord to the next and just follow Krishna's lead, follow Krishna's lead. And really a wonderful thing about our situation now, we're always hearing about, okay, it's Kali Yuga, and the people in Kali Yuga, Prayena, Payusa Sabya, Kalinasman Yugajana, Manda Sumanda Mataya Manda. People in this age are lazy, quarrelsome, misguided, unfortunate, above all, always disturbed. Yeah, it's true. We've got a lot of disadvantages being born in the Kali Yuga. We're kind of materially out of it, and spiritually, we're practically totally out of it. But Astihi Eko Mahadguna, Kirtanadeva Krishna Shya, Mukta Sangha. But there's one redeeming, according to I think it's in the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains that, this age of Kali is an ocean of faults, but there's one good thing about it, that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one can become fully liberated and go back to Godhead. See? So, in other words, so once again, getting focused again. The goal, the perfection is to live perfectly in harmony with the will of the Supreme Lord Krishna, but that's been made easy for us. You see, let's look at the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, he understood that he had to do that, but in order for Arjuna to become perfectly in harmony with the will of Krishna, he had to do something difficult. He had to be willing to fight against friends, I mean, that we know they were demons. They were rascals, these guys, the younger brothers of Duryodhana, like that. But, it's like you make friends. Even I'm sure we've all had friends who maybe didn't have the perfect character or something like that, but they're your friends and you feel affection for them. So the same thing was there, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Pandavas were intelligent enough to understand that these guys are nonsense. They're rascals, but they were cousins. There was affection. Okay, so Arjuna had to fight against friends, family, teachers, his own grandfather. Fighting in and of itself. Fighting alone is difficult. Imagine if we had to surrender to Prabhupada, we had to go out there and fight. Really, that's hard. What to speak of if you got to fight against your friends, your relatives, your teachers, and your grandfather. So Arjuna had to really do something very difficult in order to fully surrender or be perfectly in harmony with the will of Krishna. But we're not being asked to do that. By Lord Chaitanya is Krishna coming as his own devotee to show us how to be devotees. And where Arjuna was being asked to fight against friends, relatives, teachers, and his grandfather, and we're being asked to chant, dance, and take prasadam. You see? So the process has been made like a lot easier for us. We've been given an incredible concession that what we have to do to live in, at least initially, what we have to do to live in perfect harmony with the will of the Supreme Lord, Lord Chaitanya, who's none other than Krishna himself, is chant, dance, take prasadam. And once you've done that for a while, you could start, reading the books and find out what you're doing. And then, start following the regulative principles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, we've been given a great concession that, once again, the goal is to live in perfect harmony with the will of the Supreme Lord. And in order to do that in this day and age, basically it just takes a willingness. You don't have to be any kind of super duper personality. If you just have a willingness, anybody could do that. Anybody can chant, dance. Well, not anybody. I mean, some people, some physical, but generally speaking, anybody who wants to, who's willing, can chant, dance, take prasadam, etc. You see, so that's a great mercy. And so we should try to take advantage of that, because it's in our own interest. I'll give you an example. Not an example. It's in our own interest. Here, for instance, I'll just ask a question, okay? Is there anybody, I'll start off by making a statement. We all want to experience something wonderful. That's just like that might be the most basic principle of the psychology of any living entity. We want to experience something wonderful, and we don't want to experience something horrible. This holds true for human beings, and this holds true for every living creature. If you just think about it, any living creature, any cockroach in the house, or any living creature, okay, analyze its psychology. What's motivating it? It's trying to get to some safe, warm place. It's trying to get some food. That's it. It's trying to acquire some wonderful experience, just being safe so that, the other animals don't kill it and eat it, and have some food. But for them, that's a wonderful experience. And it's trying to avoid the horrible experience of getting caught, chucked out of the house, or killed, or hurt. See? No different. Human beings are the same way. We all want to experience something wonderful, and we don't want to experience something horrible. Is there anybody here that doesn't want to experience something wonderful? Oh, you can't. You're all muted. I'm sure you agree with me. Okay, so that's an important point. Here's another point, that we're created. Let's put it this way. We're dependent upon Krishna, God, for our existence. That's our picture of reality. The reason I hesitated when I said creative, because we're eternal. So if we're eternal, Krishna's eternal. I mean, it sounds funny when you say created, but it's philosophically correct to say that even though we all are eternal, we're dependent upon our existence. We're dependent upon Krishna, the Supreme Lord, for our existence. We're co-eternals, but we're dependent upon him. Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam, like that. Okay, so, and well, I'm going to digress a little bit here just to make this. It's for me, it's not difficult to accept that God exists, and I'll give you an example. Once again, from my own experience, very vivid experience over the last few years. Okay, so I'm here in New Dwarka. It's in Los Angeles, and we're in we're not in the downtown area. It's a suburb. It's called West LA, Culver City. Okay, it's about 20 minutes drive from downtown Los Angeles, where all the high-rise buildings, the big buildings. It's more like, and this is for the most part, single-story houses. But over the last, I've been here 26 years now. So the trend is in these neighborhoods now is they're moving from, when I first got here 25 years ago, pretty much all around it was just these single-story houses. That was it. Then gradually, some of the older ones got bought out by real estate developers, and they, if these real estate developers could get 2 or 3 of these older houses next to each other, they would buy them, tear them down. They wouldn't try to just fix them up and resell. They would tear them down completely. Not just gut them and renovate them, but they just completely. And then they would dig out a foundation and they put up an apartment building. And that's what's happening. That's happened in other neighborhoods in Los Angeles, historically speaking, and it's happening in this neighborhood now. All one by one, and you can see it really vividly around the temple. One by one, all these single-story houses have been, bought out by real estate developers, torn down completely, right? And then they dig a foundation and they put up an apartment building. Sometimes it's just like one, it's kind of like a single apartment building. But if they can get enough properties, one next to the other, adjacent to each other, like they were able to do on the street behind the temple, they were able to get about 6 or 7, 8 different lots. And I guess, some of the houses the people were ready to go, and others, they just gave them such an attractive offer. They offered them so much money that they were willing to sell out. So they were able to get about 8 lots right next to each other that they were able to demolish the houses, which they did. And then they proceeded to, after demolishing the houses, they, brought in the dump trucks and took everything away. And then they dug a foundation and boom, they just started constructing this apartment building. And it's taken 4 years. And, I've always, because it's right on the street behind the temple, sometimes I'm walking around there and I would talk to the guys that were working there, and I, kind of try to get information about what was going on. And, there's different stages. There's so many different people so many different construction engineers who are involved in the whole thing in terms of putting it up. You got to put in electricity, you got to put in plumbing. Yeah. I don't there's so many different aspects to constructing a modern, beautiful and functional apartment building. So it took them 4 years to do it. And it's finished now. And now it's, people are moving in, they're leasing or buying the apartments. And, it's a big thing. It's kind of like a bit of a monstrosity because they made it like a gray black kind of a color, but it's impressive still. But the point is that, I directly experienced it. This finished product now, it's huge apartment complex that they've put up, which takes up like half the block, is the result of the combined efforts of many, many, many construction engineers, many other trained artisans, technicians, laborers, all working very hard, very seriously to produce this end result of this new, modern, high-tech, etc. apartment building. It didn't happen by a random process. If somebody came along and tried to tell me, hey, Bhrgupati Das, that apartment came up as a result of a random process, a bunch of random events, I just say to them, you are totally off your rocker. You're nuts, right? Because first of all, I've witnessed it stage by stage, step by step. But even the idea of something, even when I wasn't even some building that I wasn't able to witness step by step, stage by stage coming up. Somebody tried to tell me that got there by some random process. I tell them, you're nuts. Okay, so there's an analogy here. This world, this planet Earth, is like an incredibly complex machine. I mean, I'll give one example. I'm sure there's dozens, maybe hundreds of examples could be given along this line. Let's take one function of the machine, photosynthesis. It's set up that trees and plants, they take in carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen. Has that happened by some random process? I mean, as I said, that's just one example. There's just like dozens and dozens of examples. So people who study ecology and nature and stuff could give you dozens of examples of things that are happening in nature that there's no way that could happen, have come about as a result of some random process. No more so, or then these buildings could come up by a random process. They're constructed. So in the same way, what I'm saying is this earth has been constructed. It didn't come about as a result. Just like for those buildings, there's a construction engineer. So in the same way for this earth, there's a construction engineer, there's a construction director. That's Krishna. Let's give one more example. The earth is floating, it's suspended in midair. We just take it for granted, but it's suspended in midair. This planet, it's 8,000 miles diameter, 25,000 miles circumference. Can you imagine how much it weighs? It's suspended in midair. There's no wires connected to different parts of the planet that are, going off into space and they're connected to other planets. No, there's nothing like that. It's by the energy, they call it gravity, and people tend to think, oh, it's gravity. But what is gravity? I mean, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna Prabhupada explains gravity is the energy of the Lord. He said he's holding these, he gives the analogy of just like if you hold a bunch of sand in your fist, it is no a question of it, flying all over the place. But if you just let it go, then it's going to. So in the same way, these planets are being held in the fist of the universal form. It's by Krishna's energy, in other words. You see? So the point is that behind this whole thing, there's an intelligence, an incredibly powerful and inconceivably brilliant intelligence, supreme controller, God. So now, see if I can remember my final point. Okay, right. Thank you, Krishna. It says in the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, from Krishna comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So he just gave me some remembrance because I forgot what I was going to say, and now I remember. Okay, so the final points are, so on this point of, we were talking about living in harmony, perfect harmony with the will of this Krishna. And we were talking about, how we all want to experience something wonderful. We don't want to experience something horrible. So here's the point, okay? It's not only us. We're not the only ones that want us to experience something wonderful. Krishna wants us to experience something wonderful. Krishna didn't, once again, he didn't bring us in, he doesn't have us in existence so that we could be suffering and be miserable and experience something horrible. No, That's not Krishna's mentality, right? Krishna is not some sadistic personality. Krishna wants us to experience something wonderful. In the Vedic literatures, it's stated, Eko Bahosham. Krishna goes, I'm one and I expand to many. What's the reason? Anandamaya Bhyasat. So he can enjoy pleasure, the pleasure of reciprocating with his parts and parcels. And I'm going to read you something from the Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 5th chapter, text 24, which we're in the purport, where Prabhupada expresses this very nicely. This idea of how Krishna wants us. He's Ananda, and he wants us to experience something wonderful. He wants us to be happy. We're not meant to be miserable, suffering, and unhappy. So this is from the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam. It goes. The Lord wanted to create the cosmic manifestation to give another chance to the conditioned souls who were dormant in forgetfulness. The cosmic manifestation gives the conditioned souls a chance to go back home, back to Godhead. And that is its main purpose. The Lord is so kind that in the absence of such a manifestation, he feels something wanting, and thus the creation takes place. Notice, Krishna wants us back. He wants those of us, those souls that are here in the material world, he wants us back home, back to Godhead. And to that end, he creates the cosmic manifestation. It's like a re-education facility. Actually, it's only, I heard Prabhupada say in a talk he was giving, he was doing an interview with this man, Dr. Mize, 1974 or 5, in his room here in Los Angeles. And this man was asking about, do all the souls fall from the spiritual world? They all come here to the material world? And Prabhupada said, no. He said 10%. And then he paused and he said, actually less than 10%. So most of the souls are eternally, the Nityasiddha, they're eternally in the spiritual world with Krishna. Less than 10% of us come here. Probably gave the example of like the prison. Only a small percentage of the population of a country is in the prisons. Most people are free, law-abiding citizens and free citizens. So anyway, so Krishna wants us back. Krishna wants us back to the spiritual world. And so Prabhupada goes on to say in this purpose, the whole process is to enliven the sleeping conditioned souls to the real life of spiritual consciousness, so that they may thus become as perfect as the ever-liberated souls in the Vaikuntha Lokas. He likes every part and parcel of his to take part in his eternal Rasa Lila, which is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge. So I don't know if I said it already, but I'll say, if I haven't, I'll say it now. Yeah, we're meant that the perfection of life is to become God, Krishna's dancing partner, figuratively, as we've been explaining, by desiring and endeavoring to live in perfect harmony with the will of Krishna, and literally, that's what we're hearing here. Literally, Krishna wants us to be his dancing partner. That's what the Rasa Lila is all about. The gopis are dancing with Krishna. That's what the Rasa Lila is. So Prabhupada's saying here, he, meaning Krishna, likes every part and parcel of his to take part in his eternal Rasa Lila. It doesn't just say Lila, it says Rasa Lila, which is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge. So, if you take that literally, Krishna wants us to be his dancing partner, figuratively and literally. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions?
Prabhu, this is to Paramkaran Prabhu, his hand raised.
Hare Krishna, Bhrgupati Prabhu.
Oh, Haribol Prabhu, business is Gaurish Prabhupada, my old friend.
Srila Prabhupada.
Right.
Thank you so much. Such a wonderful, very nice to see you. I was surprised that I thought you were in Portland. Then I realized you're still in New Dwarka. So Very nice class, Prabhuji. Very, very, you touched on several things that one of the things, like this whole apartment building, I just wanted to add one thing to what you said. It took 4 years for those construction workers to construct that, but also it took probably many, many decades to come up with the blueprints based on which the construction workers just put all the electric wires and plumbing and everything together. And that blueprint was the work of some intelligent architect or whatever engineer based on past failures and learnings from those. But this word, Krishna created like this one word. There were no like failed attempts, and it's perfect. And so that intelligent design aspect that you mentioned is so wonderful. It's not just the 4 years. I'm saying it's probably 200 more years of failed attempts that led to this thing, and it just couldn't have come about by itself.
By any random
Certainly
process.
not. Yes. So that was so wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for that additional point.
Do you see the shirt I'm wearing, Prabhuji?
Yeah.
Does that remind you of something?
Bhumandala. And there's
Oh,
a
no.
lotus.
There's a lotus with some binary digits at the bottom, like ones and zeros. This is the cover art for the first book, Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Science by Sadaputa Prabhu.
Right. I knew it looked familiar. Yeah.
So
What is the explanation for it?
No, this is basically saying that the interpretation that we make of everything that is digital in the digital world, and it all reduces to zeros and ones. And how can we explain the whole creation in just zeros and ones? If you start decoding it using computers, at the end it all becomes just a series of zeros and ones, and which is meaningless. And so this was the first cover design of his first book. And BI just made t-shirts out of those, and I got a t-shirt.
Okay. So
this is one of the.
What's the statement that it's making, though, that you can't reduce it to that, right? You can't just reduce it to
according to our material intelligence, that's the last level of reduction we can do, which ends up being meaningless.
Right.
You can't break down zeros and ones further. Even if you have like a beautiful picture of something, ultimately it's a JPEG image, which is a bunch of zeros and ones.
So what's our idea? That we don't reduce things to zeros and ones, but we say that in the beginning it's not zeros and ones, but it's the whole idea of reductionism that was being challenged by Sadaputa Prabhu. Right. That because our brains are small, the only approach that makes sense to us is reductionism, because we are simply incapable of understanding bigger concepts that do not involve or that cannot be understood without reductionism. We just cannot understand. We have to reduce it into something that will make sense to us, and then we can say, oh, now if you extrapolate this, boom, magically everything happens or everything makes sense. But without reductionism, our brains cannot comprehend the overall complexity. So we have to reduce things to something that is understandable by us, and the ultimate reductionism is zeros and ones. Because today everything is done by computers, and the lowest level things in a computer are zeros and ones. But the idea is that it's inadequate. It's actually an inadequate approach to understanding higher reality. In other words, to understand higher reality, we require to be promoted to a superior operating system. We need something more, right?
Exactly.
That's what we're capable of, but it's not sufficient. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you cannot understand the soul by reducing it to some zeros and ones. It will never be possible.
Right. Or what to speak of the soul, even like higher material realities, such as like Bhumandala and, Mount Meru and all these types of things. It's just, it can't be understood with, with our current brain, our current mind or whatever. We need something, it has to be revealed to us. We have to be allowed to work with a better operating system. Because our ideas, everything's coming down from the most, hasn't evolved up from no intelligence. It's devolved down from the highest intelligence. Anyway. How the boys doing?
Yeah. Boys are doing fine. They're both in college now. They've grown up, and they're happy. They're
Actually,
enjoying college life.
I know a little something about what's going on, because I can't even remember who I spoke to, but I met somebody here the other day. I think I met him here.
It is William.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Okay, so and I asked about Ram and
Gopal.
Gopal, right? Ram and Gopal. Yeah, he told me they're both at MIT.
Yes.
And both, which is, I'm sure you're both very happy they're both there together in the same place, and they're both doing well. So yeah, I found out a little something about it. How's the Portland Yatra doing?
Portland Yatra is, by your mercy, doing okay. Please come here. I'm sure you're still doing your bus or your van trips.
Well, not as much, and I'll tell you why. Because because of COVID, we stopped. It wasn't possible then, and now all the fuel prices have gone up so much that it's kind of like whatever trip we make is twice as expensive. Everything shot up double. We use both the vehicles are diesel, so now it's like practically $7 a gallon. It's practically double what it was. So all those trips are now not as practical as they were. Actually, you just invited me to come up there. That's how this happened, because William did the same thing. William said, please come up. And I said, be honest with you, I can't see myself getting up there. But what I could do is if you send me a link, I'll be happy to, do a Zoom class. And that's exactly how this happened. And that's what I do, because, you get a lot of invitations to go here, there, and everywhere, but it's not always especially to be honest with you, as you get older, it's not impossible, but it's less attractive. It's a less attractive proposition to travel to different places, by airplane or by van. Or traveling is an austerity as you get older. It used to be kind of like a fun and exciting thing when you're younger, especially now after 9/11, all the whole ordeal you have to go through at the airport and just the flight itself. So I'm more inclined to do this. If people, I'm happy to do this. If somebody sends me a link like this, we did today, I'll do this any day. And I'll change my schedule, arrange my schedule in such a way that I could do it. So that's what I'm offering to everybody, that, send me a link. There used to be a television show, Palette, and have gun, we'll travel. Have link, we'll preach. Somebody sends me a link, I'll be there. I'm happy to do it. And I was doing that during COVID. I was doing classes with devotees in Puerto Rico and somebody, and it was one in India, all over the place, mostly in the United States. But and I realized, well, why not? I could continue doing it now. And that way, rather than having to go to so many different places, I remember I had an uncle who passed away, and I was my father's brother. And he got in a car accident, and he was in one of these convalescent homes. So I rang him up on the telephone. I said, hey, his name was Bert. I said, Uncle Bert, do you want me to come visit you? And he said, no, that's okay. He said, a phone visit is almost as good as a physical visit. So, these Zoom conferences are pretty good. We hear each other. I'm seeing you, you're seeing me. It's not 100%, I can't eat the good prasadam, the good cooking. I can't appreciate the good cooking of your wife and everything, but it's about 75, 80% of what it would be if I was personally there. So I'm kind of trying to develop this, see if I can get more and more people to, be interested to let me do a Zoom class with them. And then that's my traveling.
Jai.
Good to see you, Prabhu. Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Haribo.
Anybody else have any question or anything like that?
Thanks, Prabhu. So thank you so much for the wonderful, amazing class. As you mentioned, so many points was touched upon. You beautifully explained the purport of Srila Prabhupada. And I especially love the analogy you gave of the chords on the piano. That is really, really beautiful. You know, C, the G. I'm not very good with those, but that is really, really beautiful. Wow, it is, yeah, it is very first time. I think we should mention too about Prabhupada, you know, the translation mentioning the historians, singers, the dramatist. As we were reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and I just remember Prithu Maharaj, in the past of Prithu Maharaj, when he's about to be coronated for being the king. In that time, there were expert professional reciters who just glorify the king. So I just remember that, oh yeah, there not just during Krishna's time, even before that time, there being for a long time this particular history of professional reciting. And Srimad Bhagavatam has so many places where the entire genealogy is mentioned. In the 9th canto, Krishna's, so Vishnu dynasty is mentioned, so many places mentioned. So this everything is there. And one important aspect Prabhupada mentioned about in India, there used to be dramatist or performance of dramas. At least in India, back in the old days. There used to be Ram Leela. There will be people traveling in groups performing the pastimes of Lord Ram. They've set up a camp in the village, and the entire village will come in the evening, sit, they're all, Shudras, illiterate people, you could say, working laborers. They would see Ram Leela and they would know the entire Ramayana, and much better than the outside people. And pretty much many of the traditional art forms of India, they're all centered around the superhuman pastimes of the Lord.
Right.
Kathakali, there is Bharatnatyam, and I think there's something called as Devadasis as well in Odisha, Jagannath Puri temple. They would only perform for Lord Jagannath. So it's very, very beautiful mentioned, even though he didn't give the examples, but he does mention the common theme that everything was centered around the Lord's pastimes. So it is, I should have mentioned that.
It's an important point to remember, because I mean, especially those of us who are, all of us who are here in the West now, and especially those of us who weren't born in families with, Indian background or anything like that. We have to constantly remember we're living in a human society that, as far as the important things in life are concerned, is topsy-turvy. Prabhupada used that expression, topsy-turvy. Topsy-turvy just means upside down. It's totally upside down. Means it's another way of saying it's diametrically opposite of what human society is supposed to be focused on. So it's dangerous. It's dangerous, It's easy to become, if you're not, reading Prabhupada's books and staying on top, absorbed in the philosophy, it's easy to become enamored by the glitter of materialistic civilization. It's constant improvement in cars, there's constant improvement in roads, there's constant improvement in all the creature comforts, plus, buildings, etc. Seems like, sometimes it's easy for, a devotee to start thinking, what's the problem? What's wrong with material civilization anyway? It's so nice and comfortable. And no, but it's totally missing the point. That's what's meant by topsy-turvy. It's totally missing the point that human life is an opportunity for self-realization, to become enlightened, understand about, our relationship with Krishna. So we got to remind ourselves of that all the time, and not, as a guard, and not become, to safeguard ourselves for becoming bewildered and enamored by, and it's not a black and white thing. It creeps in. It's like rust. Rust. It's not like one day your car is completely okay, and then the next day you just touch it and you think. Rust takes a while. It eats away at the integrity of the metal until finally, at the last stage, you just touch someplace that's been rusted, enough for long enough, sufficiently, and you can just poke your finger right through what you thought was metal. See, so the same thing can happen in the lives of the devotees. We have to be careful because it's not black and white. It's insidious. It just kind of creeps in there. You make a concession. What's the big deal if I eat grains that are cooked by non-devotees? You got to be practical. You got to buy stuff from the store, and this bread is okay. It's cooked by now. If it's in a machine, it's cooked in a machine, and we're just going to make it. And we're going to toast it anyway. No, there's like that's just an example off the top of my head. But you get the idea that you can't water it down. If we water down what the process what Prabhupada's given us, then we're getting into dangerous water. Pun intended. By watering it down, we're getting into dangerous water. That's going to be a problem. So we have to try to strictly stick to what Prabhupada's given us, because we're in ideally, devotees should be in a rural situation where we're depending upon the land and the cows, but not possible to set that up. Prabhupada saw that it wasn't possible to get that happening initially, and it wasn't even possible by the time he left. When they asked Prabhupada, you have to stick around. I'm trying to remember the anecdote now, the pastime. I can't remember the conversation, but Prabhupada said only half my work is done. Oh, they were glorifying Prabhupada. This is like right at the end there, 1977. They were glorifying Prabhupada. Prabhupada, you did this, you did this. Prabhupada said, yeah, but actually I've only completed 50% of my work. And he said, well, what is left, Prabhupada? Well, I want to establish Varnashram. And they asked Prabhupada, is that just like a general, or do you have some specific plan? And he said, no, specific plan. He said, I want to go to Gita Nagari, sit down and teach you how to live off the land. See, because Prabhupada knew that ideally devotees need to, just in that situation would be better. But it wasn't possible to do in the beginning. It wasn't even possible for him to do like that at that time. But so we have to be careful, because all these different things, modern amenities can be used in Krishna service. And if they are, that's good. And Bhaktisiddhanta said it's a great blunder not to use something that could be used in Krishna service, but we have to be very careful not to allow those things to use us in Maya service. We want to use them in Krishna service and not allow them to lure us into Maya service. That's the challenge, and it is a challenge. And if we're not vigilant about the basic things, chanting our rounds and following the regulative principles, and staying studied up on what's right, what's the correct way to do things, and not what's not, then we can get sucked in like that. And what happens is, as I said, it's not black and white, but our devotional service, the integrity of the metal, so to speak, will get compromised. And at some point, we could be in a very much weakened state to the point where you just poke your finger right through it. So that's a point there. Hare Krishna. Sorry, I get carried away when I give class.
You're muted, Narottam Vilas Prabhu.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much for wonderful response. Thank you so much. I love the example of the dust. Yeah. It's very thought-provoking.
So how's the community doing? How many people are coming to the Sunday program, and what's the? You're there in Portland, right, as well?
Yes, true. Yeah.
So how's the Sunday feast going? Are you getting any new people coming, or is it just the same old people? Or?
Yes, we have a lot of new people coming. We have so many outreach programs many devotees are doing.
Good.
And because of that, then devotees coming, getting serious, and also starting the journey. So we have new devotees coming through. Yes. Good.
Are you getting them to take sets of Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita?
So many devotees donated Srimad Bhagavatam during especially the Bhadra Purnima, and we tried our best to advertise, so to say, Srimad Bhagavatam.
So ridiculously cheap. The temple cost price for a set of Bhagavatams is only like $150, and of course plus shipping. Chaitanya Charitamritas is like $64 or something like that. I mean, it's incredibly cheap. So pretty much anybody who's a family comes, they're working, try to get them to take a set of both, because it's so inexpensive. It's a good way to engage them. Is Jai Baladev and his wife still there? Or
Yes.
Did they already moved to England?
I saw them doing Gordhan Puja. So
They're still there. They haven't moved yet.
Not moved yet.
Okay. Okay, well,
Yeah. Are there any questions? Anyone else any questions?
So, Prabhuji, I just remembered one more thing about this lotus. I just thought I'll just complete the previous
Please.
point. I didn't remember it previously. The point that Sadaputa Prabhu was making, that so this is actually just a picture of a lotus and the binary, representation. And the point he was making is that we can go to a very high resolution detail in image represented by zeros and ones. But when a human being sees a lotus and smells it, and the happiness that he gets out of seeing a beautiful lotus or by smelling it just cannot be obtained by this process of reductionism. So how can you get a machine to experience what a person experiences on seeing a lotus? Cannot be reduced to zeros and ones, that experience. And that is something that is beyond mechanistic conception. And this was the point that was being made in that section of the chapter, if I remember correctly.
So conscious experience cannot be reduced to mechanistic reductionism.
Exactly. Consciousness.
Consciousness, right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Wow. Okay, well, I'm done. I mean, from the listen to question or comment, anybody? Okay, thank you very much. If this was good for you guys, I'm happy to do it again. Just let me know when you. Oh, somebody's trying to say something there.
Oh, this is Damodar Leela, Prabhuji.
Oh, Haribol Mata. Good to see you.
Such a pleasant surprise to see you in the Bhagavatam class lecture. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, and I hope we can do it again and again.
I'm willing. You just let me know when it works for you guys.
Sure, definitely.
How you connected the whole music, the chord thing, it was amazing. Yeah, I'm not a musician. I did not understand it as well. I'm sure the people who are musically oriented, you can really appreciate, how expert person can add a chord and it will be very musical. But, yeah, thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Is that your initiated name? There's a name coming up, Gunjan Tiwari?
That's my legal name, Prabhuji.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, wow, I never heard that name before. Okay, that's your legal name.
Yeah.
Jai.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
so much,
Mata.
everybody, for joining for Srimad Bhagavatam class. Thank you so much for giving wonderful Srimad Bhagavatam class. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. And as I said, I'm happy to do it again. Whenever it's, works for you guys, let me know. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, everybody. Jai.
Jai
Jai.
Prabhupada.
Jai.